Hey guys, welcome to another Movement Parallels Life guided practice. I've got 30 minutes of movement for us today. You won't need anything else other than some open floor space and maybe a towel and some water. We'll start out on the ground working some mobility patterns. Then we'll get up onto our feet and work some squatting and balancing for strength and stability. After that, we'll get into some conditioning with a 4-movement circuit. And we'll save some time at the end to play around a little bit, take the pieces of that circuit and turn them into a flow. I want you to keep in mind that my movements are just a template for your movements. That means we don't have to move the same. I want you to figure out the right tempo and intensity for you today. Try to execute these movements with the highest possible quality. These movements should feel light, they should feel strong, and they should feel stable. Now, don't worry if that's not how they start out. Things might feel a little awkward at first. That's okay. Give yourself some time to learn. Be consistent with your practice, and you'll see progress very quickly. So that's really all the background that you need. It's time to get moving. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you liked the video. If so, please hit that subscribe button and tune in for more. If you have any questions, just hit me up in the comments below. All right, guys, get to it. We're going to start today with our mobility series via some groundwork. Go ahead, find yourself in a comfortable lying position. And of course, we're going to get connected to the breath. Some deep diaphragmatic breathing to begin with. Inhale, feel the stomach expand. Exhale, feel the compression in the midsection. Trying to take the breath from shallow and isolated to the upper chest and neck. Trying to expand that by breathing into the belly, using the diaphragm to drive our breathing. Going to drive your hips up next and find yourself in a supine hip bridge. We're going to continue our breathing practice while holding this bridge position. You want to make sure that your ribs don't flare or you start to excessively arch or extend into your lower back. Try to keep your low back long, but press your hips to the ceiling. Hug your knees inward. Maybe you'll feel the stretch along the fronts of the thighs, and hopefully you'll feel the effort in the backs of the legs and the glutes. Keep your face soft, keep your breathing relaxed. Keep the tension dialed in to that posterior chain. Maybe you can start playing around with extending a leg here, supporting yourself on one leg. Feel those hamstrings and glutes work extra hard. Don't give up any of your position, and keep your breathing deep. You can play around with any variations on these bridging movements that you want. Might be reaching, might be extending the legs. You can reach the legs out at different angles. But really try to focus on creating some activation in the backside of the body. We want those muscles to wake up, and oftentimes they fall asleep when we end up sitting for too long. This is a great opportunity to just bring some mindfulness into the body, holding this very foundational position. And we'll move on. Work your way up to seated. We'll go into a side bend sit. You can start playing around with this familiar movement, the knee swivel. You've probably seen this before if you've been watching any of the previous videos. Taking the hips into internal and external rotation. Try to focus on keeping the spine long. As you can see, you can post the hands back behind the hips to make sure that you can hold a good position in the body. And we're going to add a rotational reach into the mix. So I hold my side bend sit, reach across my front thigh, and then start to twist my shoulders and reach. So I'm looking back, reaching back behind me. Reach out for your end range with as much strength and stability as you can. Do that about 5 or 6 times and then go try it on the other side. As I reach, I'm going to allow the hip to open up and extend a little bit more. So just play around with this and see what kind of sensations emerge in your body. Find those relevant stretches and try to amplify that. Back to our side bend sit. I'm going to start to just hinge forward here, keeping a long spine, hinging at the hips. Gives me a nice stretch in the glutes. And then I rise up to a split kneeling position. Rotate and go into a back reach. And I'll switch my hips here, slow and controlled, making my hips work. Hinge, hunt around, find those stretches, make those small tweaks to the position that give you the stretch that feel good in your body. Make sure that you're continuing to breathe deeply. And then start adding these improvisational movements. Rise up to kneel and back reach. Play around with the angles here. Really extend through the arm and use some imagination here. Really force yourself to get to your end range of motion. And continuing on, going into these slow hip switches, swinging the back leg forward, switching the legs out in front, taking the opposite leg, wrapping it back, switching from hip to hip. I love this little movement pattern to help strengthen the lateral hips, something that I've been very deficient in, but these have helped. You want to make sure that your hips are strong and stable, not just out in front of you, but at all angles. Make sure to keep breathing deeply and keep trying to find that balance of tension and relaxation in the movements. The tension is what stabilizes you and allows you to hold the position strong, but within every movement, there's also going to be some space for you to relax, to make sure that you can breathe, and to make sure that you can express some fluidity and softness in the movement. Adding and expanding onto these movements now, changing the angle of the reach, and then now stepping the back leg forward out of that split kneel into a half kneel and reaching forward. Again, these similar variations keep popping up throughout all these guided practices. It's just a matter of seeing how the dots connect and seeing how you can add little changes and little nuances into the mix. Keep playing around with this pattern here, split kneel, changing the reach, and then stepping forward to half kneel, extend forward, lunge and reach. About 3 cycles here to match the previous side. Really challenge yourself to exhibit control through every piece of the movement, through every inch of the range of motion, through every transition. Try to express balance and control through all your movements. Going back to the side bend sit hip switches here. Just ironing out this movement, polishing the edges, starting to understand the sequence and timing that make this simple little action as efficient as possible. I'm going to start to pick up a little speed and then rise up into the split kneel. I'll kick the leg around for a little bit more momentum in the hip switch and then rise up to the split kneel. We see these movements over and over again, but every opportunity, every practice is an opportunity to polish them just a little bit more. And then we'll wrap up our first series here with just some different seated positions. Soles of the feet together, butterfly sit, balancing sit, and long sit. Trying to hold these positions with as much strength as possible. So the legs are strong, the core is strong. We're trying to elongate the spine and sit as tall as we can. Adding some dynamic stretching through these reaching actions. making sure to maintain deep breathing. I'm trying to find that connection through our core. In your balance, sit here, shift your weight from side to side, and feel the contractions in your core and in your obliques as that's occurring. Remember, these ground-based movements, these little mobility warm-ups are more about activating your muscles than taking them to their absolute maximum stretch. This is about waking things up, getting everything online, and making sure that it's prepared for more dynamic movements to come later on in the session. That'll wrap our opening series. Great job with that, you guys. I hope you're feeling good, ready for more, because we're going to shift gears and turn up the heat a little bit next. We've got the dynamic series on tap here. We're going to start by getting into a foot hand crawl position and go through this tripod transition. I sometimes call it the pass under transition, to take us from a standard foot hand crawl to an inverted or crab crawl. So we've got this really nice rotational movement here where you're going to balance on your opposite hand and foot and then rotate in such a way that the leg always passes underneath the body. Now take your time with this movement. It can be a little tricky with the balance and the rotation and the momentum. So slow it down. Make sure that you're pushing strong through the hand and the opposite foot and being in control of the movement. And then you can build speed in time. All right, we're going to make one more transition and come up to standing and into our squat pattern, starting to open the hips with some squat lateral shifting next. So you're just going to start to lower your center of gravity to just a little bit of a squat and start to sit side to side. I start out shallow and then expand the range of motion from there. Try my best to coordinate my breathing with the action. So I'm inhaling as I cross the midline and exhaling as I sit to each side. You can use your hands to give you some extra support. Make sure to keep the core strong and you're actively pulling yourself down to the ground, not just falling into each squat position. Let's cycle back through those two movements, back to the tripod transition. Maybe you can start linking together some of those turns now. You can play around with the movement, add any shifting movements in there, a little bit of crawling, any improvisation that you want to add here. But remember, it's just an opportunity to dial in your core stability and shoulder stability. And just a few more reps here. We'll take it up to standing. Back into the squat lateral shifting. Feel free to linger in your squats as long as you need to. The whole point is to identify where the position of best stability is. Identify what muscles need to activate and how can you bring everything on your body on board to make this the best possible position. This is one of my favorite movements simply because making sure that the hips are mobile is so key to being able to move well. So many of our movements are really driven by our hips. That's the link between our upper and lower body. So it's just really essential that you keep this area in good condition and that you just have an understanding of how the parts work and what your current situation is, what your current range of motion is like. Make a transition here next. We're going into split squats. And I like to do these just a little bit differently, trying to bring a little bit more context and integration into this movement pattern. So you could easily just set your feet up and go up and down, but what I want you to practice on here is stepping and dropping into your lunge just a little bit more dynamically. This ends up being a more practical or more athletic expression here. And I just want to make sure that you can set your feet and maintain your stability as you lower your center of gravity. It's these little changes, these little tweaks to the intention behind the movement that really make all the difference. And this small shift takes the split squat from an isolated exercise that you perform the same way over and over into an adaptable movement pattern that can help you respond in real-world situations and changing environments. We make a transition here into some get up patterns. We're going into a rock up into a deep knee bend. Rocking on the back, generating enough momentum to come up onto the feet and then to stabilize in that deep knee bend position. Change your stance around if that causes any knee pain or is too uncomfortable for you. But I think this is a great way to condition the feet and the ankles, as well as dial in some coordination and timing as you go from a rock up with a rounded spine to a knee bend, which needs a long spine. Few more reps here. We'll rock up, and now from that deep knee bend, we'll go into a kneeling position. I'm going to lean back, drop the knees softly to kiss the ground, pull back into the knee bend. This is another one that's really challenging for the feet and the ankles. Use your hands to assist you here if need be. You just want to make sure that your knees aren't banging the ground each time you make that transition, but you can see I lean back as my counterbalance so my knees can softly kiss the ground and come back up. It's a lot of control and strength through the feet. Now let's combine the two. Roll back, up to the knee bend and transition right to kneeling, touch, and then back into the rock up. You can start playing around with that, maybe adding a get up in between, coming up to standing. Recently, this has just been one of my favorite patterns to practice just because it's so fluid and brings you through so many different unique positions. You're going from on your back to knees to standing so quickly. And then just a nice way to start to transition into more movement. It's these little drills that start to build the athleticism. And here I kind of lost my place and forgot what I was doing next. So we just ended up doing some kneeling hip rotations. A few internal, external rotations for each side. Just long enough for me to remember what I had planned next. Oh yeah, balance. So we're going to get up to standing, single leg balance, and then going into a hinge. Hinging at the hips, maintaining a relatively straight spine. This is the knee and the hip flex to bring us down to touch the ground. Same way as we talked about with those bridges earlier, I'm really trying to make the muscles of the posterior chain and the lateral muscles of the hip, I want those to wake up and fire. And if you're not feeling them yet, let's move on to the single leg weaving. You're going to stand on one leg, and the free leg is just going to rotate internally and externally in a fluid fashion. And last part of the balancing drills here, we've just got these little single leg hops, trying to maintain stability with each hop. And we're going to hit the same sequence on the other side. Hinges, weaving, and hops. Just enough repetitions to get those muscles to warm up, start burning a little bit. Maybe start to feel the lower leg, the ankle, the foot start to wake up. We want everything online and ready to help us move for our circuit today. The more accustomed to these balancing drills that you get, the more dynamic they can become. The more movement that you can create, the more you have to force that standing leg to stabilize. And through each of these small hops, I want you to feel the communication between your ankle, knee, and hip as you absorb the landing and get some spring and some lightness with each jump. Just a few more here. You can hit pause, take a brief rest, but we're just about to get into the real work. Our circuit's coming up next. Good job, you guys. All right, in this movement circuit, we've got crawling, tripods, rolling, and jumping. So we're just going to get acclimated for this first round, just one pass through the circuit, starting with the lateral shuffle crawl. You want to lower the center of gravity, reach the hands past the feet,
shift weight into the hands, and just perform a little shuffle step or jump past the hands to start linking those strides together. Second movement we're looking at, this is very similar to the tripod transition we did earlier, except we're not going to go all the way into the inverted crawl. You're just going to rotate, extend the leg to the side, come back to the foot hand crawl, alternate sides. We'll go to seated and try out a back roll next. So we're going to use that same rock up action, but you're just going to kick your feet all the way past your head and try to exit the roll. Can be a little intimidating to go hips overhead, so just take your time with it. You might roll off to the side a few times, no big deal. And if you're feeling sketchy, you can try this variation, the knee hand hip roll. So from that knee and hand crawling position, you're just going to sit your hips off to the side, and that's just another pretty slick roll that you can add in. The split squat jump finishes out the circuit. Just about 4 repetitions, focusing on explosiveness and then stability in the landing. Take a few seconds to recover. If you do these movements very dynamically, very explosively, you'll see that you don't need a lot of repetitions, but your heart rate will come up. Take some time to breathe and relax in between rounds. Fast and loose drills, shake the shoulders out, shake the limbs, bounce, release any of the tension that's accumulated. We're going to get ready for the second round, in which we're going to do 2 passes through that circuit, back to back. Here we go. Lateral shuffle crawl for 8 strides. Plant those hands firmly, keep your core strong, and attack each repetition. Making the transition next. Foot hand crawl tripods. 6 alternating reps. Make sure that support arm stays strong and stable, pushing into the ground. Back rolls and hip rolls up next. Any combination. Set yourself up in that split squat. 4 jumps. Explode out of that bottom position. Set those feet and absorb your landing. Right back through to the lateral shuffle crawl, 8 strides. Keep breathing. And stay focused on each repetition. Tripod, 6 reps. Back rolls, 2 repetitions. Make them clean. Find your split squat, 4 explosive jumps. And rest and recover. I'm just going to take a few seconds here, walking around, catch my breath. Fast and loose drills to shake out some of the tension. If you need a little bit of extra time, feel free to pause the video here. Otherwise, we're coming back in just a few seconds. Don't linger too long here. Just long enough to get the breathing under control. To maintain the focus, we take these short breaths to make sure that the movement quality stays high. All right. Third and final round, we're going 3 times through the circuit. Here we go, lateral shuffle crawls. Make the transition here, foot hand crawl. Tripod kick through, 6 times. You start to feel the coordination of it, go faster, pick up the intensity. Transition into your back rolls or hip rolls, 2 to 3 reps. Find that split squat position, 4 explosive jumps. Accelerate out of the bottom position. Going right back through. Second pass, second cycle. Lateral shuffle crawl. Hug your core tight. Keep that compact position so you can jump through, shuffle through quickly. Transition, foot hand crawl, tripods. Sit through, back roll. Up to your feet. Split squat jump. Decelerate those landings. Soft landings. Keeping good posture. Last cycle here. Lateral shuffle crawl. Hold on to your breathing. Keep it in check. And keep working hard. Bring that intensity. Just a few more reps. Tripods. Switch those hips and kick through quickly. Back roll. Hit one more back roll, transition into your split squat, and explode. 4 reps. Finish it up, and then you're recovering. You can rest for up to 3 minutes and get ready because we're going to transition into our flow work. As promised, we got to save a little time at the end for some fun and some freestyle. We're going to take the 4 movements that we just played around in the circuit and start to throw them into a flow, start to improvise. You can piece them together any way that you want. You can watch me for the cues, but I just want you to explore these movements, have fun, and see what happens. right, you guys, I hope you found a good rhythm in your flow and freestyle. We'll finish things off with some stillness, some breathing, and some stretching. So again, find your supine position, lying wherever you're comfortable. Focus on your deep belly breathing. Try to elongate the breaths, elongate the inhales and the exhales. Allow your tension to melt away. Allow yourself to just melt into the floor. Start to elongate those breaths. Deep inhales, long exhales. Just appreciate the stillness, the calm. Give yourself those few minutes to return to baseline. Can carry on that practice of stillness, but start changing positions. One that I like is the side bend sit. Now using this as more of a stretch. Same principles, still adding some strength to this position, but going deeper into the stretch, using the breath, and trying to identify any areas that have any residual tension or tightness and see if I can allow some of that to just melt away. It can be so easy to just throw in the towel when we're done with an effort or just lose track of our breathing. But I think there's a lot to be said for training yourself to slow down intentionally, focus on your breathing, and just be present with the experience of feeling that exertion, feeling that fatigue and that stress in your body, and then using your breath to regulate, to downshift and bring yourself back to center, bring yourself back to a calm balance. I think it's a really good habit to get into. The breathing is the foundation here. The mindfulness is the foundation. The exact positions of stretch are really up to you and what feels right for your body. What I want you to continue to come back to is how being present in your movements, being aware of how you're moving, leads you to understand your body in a deeper way. It leads you to have a greater intuition about how to move, and that can have a huge impact on how you live as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining me for this practice. I really appreciate you all watching. I appreciate all the support that's coming in. Keep moving, keep playing, keep loving your practice, and I'll see you in the next video.